All right, good deal. All right, thank you. Welcome all to the GRU workshop. First, we will have a roll call.
Okay, member Holtz. Member Hall. Member Crow.
Here.
Member Pepe.
Here.
Member Morse.
Here.
Member Sperlingwood is absent, I see, and Chair Jameson.
Here.
Good.
Thank you. All right, next, adoption of the agenda.
Also move.
Thank you. We have a second. Second. You, any discussion on the adoption of the agenda?
I'd like to propose a change amendment to the document handed out. I think we ought to start with a recognition of the change of Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you for bringing that up and congratulations. Very pleased to see that.
Nice. Appreciate it.
Be careful what you wish for.
My best. Thank you.
Any other discussion from the board? Discussion from the public on the agenda?
Yes, just ever so briefly, thank you, Scott. So I would like to speak concerning the commission's adopted rules on item D, during that portion. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be asking. Thank you. No other discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay. I'm ready.
Towards the tail end of this meeting, I'd like to introduce another subject to be discussed at a future date.
Yeah, we'll have a member comment and you can do it. Okay. That works. Okay. All right, passes unanimously. Now we move on to item D1, GRU operation update.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll introduce, as you all know, last year we were trying to create a better operational report and update and continuing to look for feedback from the members. And today I think is the perfect time to do that. So really this is a time you have the document. If you have questions, if you have recommendations, suggestions, quite a few of the staff are here that help provide the data, are responsible for the areas that provide the data. So they're here to answer questions or hear some of that feedback. So I want to share that. I went out of order. I did want to share something before that. In the fall, late fall, we had some discussion, or I had some discussion with you about subcommittees and the city commission changing some direction of where they were going. So where all of that landed is the UAB is going to continue as the UAB, and most other committees are going to continue. There were two committees that were sunsetted: the Digital Access Committee and the Environmental Justice Committee, simply because those items are covered at other committees, and so they didn't feel like they needed separate ones. And then there was one, so those two were sunsetted. One committee was added, which is public safety, so primarily police and fire. Was added. UAB stayed as it is. So I wanted to provide that update. I don't think we've had that discussion since all of the city commission was considering those. And then the commissioners, several new commissioners said as they get used to the system and all that, they may revisit. But for now, this is the way they wanted it to be. So with that being said, back to the operational update. Like I said, staff is here to answer questions or hear suggestions. I know we did, Member Fultz provided some written questions that we can address those as well. And I believe
Have them that I can.
those questions and the answers. So it's really up to you as members of how you want to bring forth information or questions.
One approach would be to start with Jason's questions. Unless anyone has any desires at this point.
Okay. I feel like most of my questions were addressed in the response. I did have a couple of follow-ups, if that's okay. So going down to question 5, asking about the coal consumption in September 22. The response was this was not a mistake. On September 1st, there was consumption of 162 tons of coal as they were minimizing gas consumption to accommodate the gas day, which ran from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. the following day. Could you just remind us, I know we've talked about gas days. Could you just remind us like what is meant by that?
Sure. Dana, if you want to get up and kind of talk that through. That's all right.
Natural gas is on a daily market, goes from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. and it is a global spectrum. You know, for ours, you get our gas from FGT. If you have a gas alert day, which means there's a limited amount of gas, they can impose penalties when you use above those limits. Typically, some of those limits are 15 to 25%. So when we have a hard time getting enough natural gas to run our units, we have the diversity of our fuel to be able to use the biomass plant or to use coal on our ground as an emergency fuel or liquid fuels if we have. That would be an example of this last December. This Christmas timeframe would have been, again, another perfect example. We burned quite a bit of coal over those 7 days that we had the cold weather. But that's why we have that emergency fuel. So answer your question, gas alert goes from 10 a.m. to it starts every day. So in the morning when we quote gas prices, we won't know at 10 o'clock what we have for the following day, which is called the nomination, which is the amount of natural gas that you can receive without receiving a penalty.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Another question, I believe this one. So there were 2 bullets in here regarding the IRP in the operations report. And they seem to me that those 2 bullets were redundant and perhaps out of date. And so I just wanted to clarify, I thought we were at a different place with the IRP sort of public engagement piece than what was stated in those 2 bullets. And so I just wanted to get clarification on that. If it's helpful, I can pull up the operations report.
Do we need to go to the microphone?
I could hear Dino fine, but I don't know if you guys up there can. Which question is it?
So it was at the bottom of page 19, if you've got the Q4 operations report open, I believe it's about on page 19.
I can't see the page number.
They're there.
Yeah, so those 2 bullets there at the very bottom, they seem to be saying somewhat the same, but somewhat different things, and they both seem to be somewhat out of date. So I was just wondering if we could get clarification on that.
Sure. Chair and members, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer. The Sustainability Department is responsible for running the IRP. And if these highlights came from Q4, which would end in September, then you're right, they are quite out of date. At that time, we had not yet finalized the contract. We had not yet gone to the city commission and selected a final vendor for that. And we had not gone for approval of that vendor. So yes, that is out of date because it ended in September. But at that point, we were in the selection process, in the vetting process of those 3 vendors. We subsequently made a selection.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'll just follow that up with saying, we're trying to get into a better rhythm, that we don't have something so outdated that we're talking about in January from the 4th quarter of the fiscal year. And so that won't be the regular thing. It'll typically be the month, like a month and a little over a month after the end of a quarter that we will typically get the report, not this far out.
That makes sense, thank you.
And just to be clear, so this is actually Q3 highlights.
It's Q4, which is fiscal year, which ends September 30th of, yep.
That's right, fiscal year. I'm looking back that far. Okay, next question. At the bottom of this is in the backup, the response here at the bottom of page 6, talking about the quarterly coal sourcing report. The response was, this information does not add significant value to the operational report. That would likely be static or minimally variable. So this is actually the quarterly coal sourcing report, unless something has changed. This is actually by ordinance, from what I recall, the required report to the city commission every quarter. I had been making a public records request every quarter because I wanted to see that data. And eventually we just had a conversation with the UAB and said, hey, instead of me making a separate public records request every quarter, can that just be integrated into our quarterly operational update? And my understanding from our conversations was that was okay. I know things have changed significantly in terms of the amount of coal that the utility is buying. But I think there was a big conversation in this community years ago about where that coal comes from. And to me, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here, is I'd like to be updated. And I think the community would like to be updated on how much coal we're consuming and buying and where it's coming from. And those reports have been very simple, little couple lines that have been submitted every quarter. And if possible, I'd like to see those continue to be in our operational updates.
Our chair, board members, air supply officer. So we didn't have any coal we procured for 18 months. The first coal we procured was this last July. So the coal source reports you would have gotten up to those 5 quarters would have had 0 coal. We only buy coal, mine coal. We don't buy mountaintop coal. We buy it from very specific mines. The fact that we use coal for emergency purposes, we aren't experimenting with types of coal because we don't have the proficiency in coal that we had before. So we need it for emergency. We shift from natural gas to coal. We need our operators to have coal that we're used to burning and that they can run very proficiently. It's performance coal we have. So for example, we had a coal train this last July. So we did a coal source report. We just recently procured a contract to get 3 trains that will be in this quarter. So it'll be the second quarter of 23, but the first year calendar quarter of the year. We're going to get 3 trains between now and March. These are all going to come from coal mines in Appalachia. This one will come from West Virginia. But again, it's not mountaintop coal. It's under our specifications. The coal sourcing report will reflect that. So the coal sourcing report you had was reflective of the July train, which had some issues, some quality issues that we had to get back from our miner. And I covered that in my report. But we since then recovered all that cost. So to answer your question, the coal sourcing report will include every time. But just recognize these 3 trains we get now, we may go 18 months to 2 years without getting any additional coal.
That's great.
If we get here today, we have about 50. Well, I understand it's heavy emergency fuel. This last, you think about February of 21, okay? Having coal was very important. We were on solid and liquid fuel for 4 days, and we didn't have any customer issues at all. This last December, we had the ability to blend and not incur any penalties on natural gas. As you know, that polar vortex there. So having that diversity is really important for us. We have about 58,000 on hand right now, and we expect after we get the 3 trains, we'll about 90,000 tons of coal. And that'll hold us probably for 2 years. It's dependent on the weather and the circumstances.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So member folks, are you looking for that to be in the report? I guess I'm a little
If
confused.
possible, yes, that would be great. And even if it's a 0, like I said, that, to me, that's great news. So yeah, if it could be included, I appreciate it. And that was all of my thoughts based on the feedback.
And just because, so is there any issues with having a quarterly coal report?
I don't think so. It's going to be, most of the time, it's going to be no coal. And I do want to just reinforce what Dino said, is that coal is no longer a regular thing that we're burning. It is absolutely a critical emergency fuel source because it's a physical thing we have on site and available. Natural gas we're purchasing, and that can limit us. Deerhaven Renewables could be limiting just because of the size of the unit. And so it is important for the fuel diversity that we do have that physical hedge basically available on site to burn. So
Thank you. I agree with you.
I was just wondering, what do you mean by mountaintop versus what we were getting? For definition.
Chair, board member, there was an issue brought up by the city commission about 7 years ago about where we would get our coal. And we did not want to procure coal that would affect the environment or the natural stability of the fields, and that would be mountaintop coal. So we usually typically get deep mine coal. We do not come mountaintop, so we don't contribute to, at the time, something the city commission did not desire for us to contribute to. And by the way, performance coal that we burn is mine coal. And it would not be very well for us to use mountaintop coal for burning purposes anyways.
Okay, thank you.
And just because, so we're talking mountaintop removal coal is.
Yes, sir.
We got, so that's very impactful environment.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry for that question.
Anything? Go ahead, please.
I just want to underscore what Walt said. On the time that I've been on the UAB, last 2 or 3 years, I would say the mindset of UAB members that I'm aware of has been very leery of coal, and we understand that this is an emergency, but I just want to underscore the emotional dimensions of this. The UAB is very strongly committed to the goal of moving to renewables, as we all are, and we're very aware of the need to move ever more progressively toward that goal. And we've been concerned about coal, and I just want to emphasize the emotional importance of that.
Thank you. I mean, just speaking for myself, I mean, as green as I can get, but I really don't think that the public values our fuel diversity enough. I mean, it's a great thing that we as GRU have, that, you know, to have a pile of coal there. I see that as a really good thing in my mind. I don't speak for anyone else, but so it's not, you know, get rid of all that stuff in my mind. Anyone else from the board? Comments from the public?
Yes, you could do the slide in this backup that shows, and I'll leave this with you before I begin. There's a slide in there that goes about generation by fuel type, please. So I can put that up, that'd be it's in today's backup for this item.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
22, go down to 22, go down three slides, looks like. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. All right, so good evening, members. Nathan Scott. So just by background for you new UAB members that don't know me, former state utility regulator, used to work for FPL Energy, did power generation all through my professional engineering career. So suffice to say, I pretty much know what I'm talking about. This is a slide in today's backup, and the notes to this slide states that Deer Haven was operating about 84.4 megawatts at each hour, which is high considering September's shoulder month with low loads. Generation on DHR was not limited during this time and ran high as a result of it being the cheapest fuel and cheapest megawatt unit. Well, you can see here, this is Deer Haven biomass. This is here used natural gas fired generation, and this is September. This is the month they're talking about. Deer Haven's rated 102.5, 102 megawatts nominal. So it wasn't running at full load. So it stands to reason if it was running and it was the most economically dispatched unit, it would have been fully loaded potentially. If you compare to the slide I gave you, Barry, what they told the city commission on January 4th, fuel costs incremental fuel costs and minimum load, Kelly was $14.80 per megawatt hour. Deer Haven Renewables was $20.72 per megawatt hour. So the slide at the bottom, and this is what I'm referring to, what they told the city commission. I couldn't make that meeting because I was going to question this. Where do we get the next most economical megawatt? Combined cycle one, which is Kelly. Which is next? Deer Haven 1. Okay, so biomass isn't the most economical. So these two slides seem to be a little bit incongruent, but we're burning a lot of gas. And my issue for coming to this is I respect GRU, I respect municipal utilities, but I really think a lot of what's going on here with the UAB is misplaced. We have bigger issues that need to be addressed that are being completely ignored because of political ideology. I looked in the backup for January. I did not see this report. As a former state utility regulator, as a GRU customer, as somebody that knows what I'm looking for, I think the old report was far superior. It talked about emissions. There were things in there that are completely gone. So I'll wrap up with this, is that, you have major issues facing the utility, meters not being read. You have 39,000 of unpaid bills or shut off that there were no liens filed against. A lot of issues with our rates, but none of that is relevant to the UAB's discussion because we're talking about rating homes and all kinds of stuff, which is nice, but that's not the way to focus on a utility that's leveraged to the hilt with debt, that has the highest rates in the state, residential rates, highest commercial rates for generating utility. And I mean, real quick, and I'll wrap this up. GRU customers, to a comment made, already paying a premium for fuel diversity, but that's not really translating into lower bills. As an illustrative example, FPL's residential rates at 1,000 kWh are $62 less than GRUs. GRUs rates are higher by $62 in FPL. Okay. So again, and as to mountaintop coal, and I'll just conclude with this, that's great. They directed it not to do mountaintop coal, protects the environment out of state. But if the city can direct GRU to do that, they certainly can direct GRU not to put a solar plant in that parcel that was denied by the county. And also the developer now says, we're not going to do it. Those folks are entitled, local folks are entitled to some peace of mind. I hope the UAB would get behind that. And there needs to be some discussion about the solar plant because that's been delayed. That should be back on track, hopefully in a more appropriate location, but I haven't heard the UAB even talk about that. So try and focus on the real issues, not all these niceties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
I appreciate the accommodation on top there. Thank you.
Does anyone from GRU want to?
Yeah, we can talk about the slide referencing and the fuel diversity.
Minimal load, and minimal load is not the most efficient thing, so the data will even be more disparate.
Yeah, Eric will address.
Chair, members, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer. I've had the responsibility of forecasting fuel, of forecasting generation and operating the grid for the last 8 years. What you're seeing in front of you is absolutely true. What you see by fuel type is actually the total number of megawatt hours that are generated by each fuel type, and the percentage is calculated there. Running at full load, even at with DHR at 100 megawatts around the clock, doesn't yield you much more than what you have, simply because it's a ratio of all the megawatt hours that are produced. When you look at September, your peak loads are still in the 300 megawatt range, 300 to 350 megawatt range. Assuming that at peak load, Deerhaven only contributes to a third of your load. Okay, so with that forecasting and with the actual reporting, it's done by megawatt hour produced. If you look at the capacity factors, and I'm not sure if it's on this slide, but the capacity factors, what that tells you is how much of the time, how much of the load that unit was running at. An 84 or 85% capacity factor means that it was running roughly at 85 megawatts for that entire time period. When you look at those numbers, we can't run it all the time at 100 because we have lows in the evenings. We have to turn our units down, right? So we can't run it at full load around the clock every day. There are times, but every day we cannot do that. And so we do have to accommodate for that. But these numbers are true and factual. When you look at the total number of megawatt hours and the percentages of what's produced from each unit, the capacity factors for those time periods, and that's the real story. Capacity factor and load factor. If you look at those times, it shows you exactly where the units were running. And it was running at full load or at the highest load possible during those times. We dispatch by economics. So the computer will literally tell us, run the most economic unit to the top. If we can accommodate that based on system constraints and there's no other barriers to that, then that is what we do. So these numbers are true and factual. The forecast is done in the same way. It's simply, as the general manager said, a factor of how large the unit is. It's only 100 megawatts. If your loads are between 300 and 350 at your peak load, it can only contribute at the most a third of your load. So.
You can also address the slide that Mr. Scott was referencing.
Absolutely. So there's a reason why that slide is there. That slide is simply to show an incremental heat rate choice of which unit you run. As I mentioned before, we dispatch our units based on incremental heat rate, and that translates into a cost. That cost, effectively that heat rate times the fuel cost, gives you the cost per megawatt hour. So when we go to make a decision, that's what decision we make that on. That slide was purely made up numbers. And I believe there is a footnote that's there that says fictional numbers. The reason it was taken out of the slides is to prevent that confusion. So there's no time last month or during that time that CC1 was at $14 and whatever it was. There was no time. You can't do that when gas is $3+. The math doesn't add up, right? So those numbers were purely conjecture to make a statement about incremental heat rate to demonstrate how we choose the next most economical megawatt. that question was true and purely for demonstration purposes. You take the lowest number, you ramp that unit up to the highest point that it can output, then you take the next highest number and do the same thing. Purely for demonstration purposes, those numbers are purely fictional and should not be used to base any kind of operational decisions on. I believe that footnote was there on the slide.
Thank you. Anything else from the public?
Yeah, I would just want to note, I mean, clarity. Again, you have the ability to run units. Deerhaven 2 wasn't sized correctly, but again, if it was the lowest cost, I would expect it to be operating at 100%, and then you throttle down your gas plants, and that's not what was said. So I think there is something to distinguish here. I'll rely on GRU to dispatch its units, but again, that full load, if it's the cheapest, you're running your cheapest unit first, just as he said.
Mr. Chair, I'll just clarify. So Deerhaven Renewables was running at full load. At full load, it's still only about a third of the demand that was out there. So the lowest cost unit was at 100 plus megawatts, which its capacity is 103. It was running almost the whole time at that. The only time this whole summer that it wasn't like that, and in the fall, is if there was some sort of an outage. As it was operational, it was always running full load.
Mr. Chair, that's not what that slide said. It says 86% capacity factor, 86 megawatts.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dino.
Eric Walter said it just perfectly, but I was trying to describe typical day, August 1st to come in the morning, loads at 160, 170 megawatts. You have 4 plants running. 4 plants are running. That means all the plants are at the bottom, which includes DHR. DHR is put down at the bottom because you need those 4 plants for that peak at 7 p.m. that evening. Okay, so the plants are turned down overnight, DHR equivalent, because you steer down the other plants as much as you can, and then you have to bring DHR down. And those plants are 4 to 12 hours away. These are not gas turbines. You can't start them and they're up on 15 minutes. They're 4 to 12 hours away. So you will work the average throughout the day, as Mr. Walters captured, you're running throughout the day at 100 megawatts. That is only going to be a third, at 350 megawatts, 370 megawatt peak day, it's only going to be about a third. The part of that slide we'd be proud of is that 30% of the energy for GRU is coming from a biomass plant, renewable energy. That's a pride side. It's a third, as he described. But that whole idea throughout the summer, we run our units and set the way for reliability purposes. You have to turn them down every night, and you run them at the peak in the afternoon, and you run them on the economic dispatch, as Mr. Walters described.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to home energy scores.
If I could, one more thing on this item. My understanding has been that this operational report is a work in progress. And you all have been, from my perspective, been doing a great job of tweaking it in response to our interests and comments and things going on. So, I mean, I would certainly extend that to anybody in the community that wants to see changes to what these, because to me, the previous format that it was in was not easily digestible to anyone outside of GRU staff who really understand what all those numbers and acronyms and things mean. So the more we can move in the direction of creating a report like this that is digestible by members of the public, like myself, the better. And so I would just welcome anybody to continue to offer suggestions for how this report can be improved. And it sounds like it's going to be an evolving document moving forward.
Thank you. All right, move on to home energy scores.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we're going to give a brief presentation. I believe Brandy is going to give a presentation. So she's going to come up to the podium and give a brief presentation on home energy scores. So part of what we do is do energy assessments in people's homes as they request those. The UAB had asked us to look at, as part of that work, to do what is called home energy scores. And so it's a scoring system that can be used across different industries, or not industry, but different used in different ways across the city. And so tonight is to kind of talk through that, what that would look like if we were to add that to our assessments. So with that, Brandy.
So good evening, board and Mr. Chair. I'm Brandy Shadow. I'm a residential efficiency program coordinator with GRU. This topic got brought up at the last UAB meeting that I was able to attend. So we got some of your questions answered and have some good information.
Can you get the microphone closer to you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better? I'll try and speak louder. All right, next slide, please. So the UAB's question was, can GRU staff use the home energy score methodology adopted in the city's rental permit ordinance to assign energy scores to homes when conducting our home energy surveys? Next slide. So home energy surveys and home energy minimum assessments or home scoring has a lot of similarities, but also many differences. A GRU home energy survey are performed by trained staff to inspect your home, including your windows, doors, ductwork, insulation, appliances, and other equipment, and offer customized tips for making your home more efficient, ultimately. And then your home energy score assessment came about in 2021. The city instituted energy efficiency standards for all rental units consisting of 4 units or less to save on energy costs for tenants. During the inspection of the rental unit, information is gathered to ensure compliance with the standards specified in ordinance and to assess a home energy score for that unit. The reason why I put these on here, what the takeaway from this slide would be, while the goal of the home energy score is to ensure that rental housing meets established codes via a score that dictates required actions by the home or building owner, GRU energy surveys are a courtesy program with the goal of empowering and providing our customers with a no or low cost way to save money on their utility bills. So again, very similar, but also very different. Next slide, please. In GRU's admin guideline, surveys consist of checking the thermal envelope of the home. That includes the insulation, attic ventilation, doors, and windows. When we check doors and windows, we are checking for leaks, but also what types of doors and windows. The major energy equipment, heating, AC system, water heater, and the refrigerator. We monitor the energy use by reading and checking meter reads, as well as looking at consumption history and billing history before we even get out into the home. And then we offer energy and saving tips. These surveys do not consist of energy ratings and or blower door test. I learned today that the home scoring also does not consist of blower door test. It's just a question asked during the home scoring process. Next slide, please. GRU's energy surveys. During the survey, staff uses a checklist to develop an energy and water action saving plan for the resident. The checklist specifically states at the top, this service provides suggestions that may improve the efficiency of your home. The major items that may cause high energy and water use in your home have been checked. Equipment type, efficiency and condition, operation pattern, and weather affects these savings. The property owner is ultimately responsible for how these suggestions are used and what equipment is repaired or replaced. And we have that in there, just saying we've made our tips and suggestions, but we're not enforcing the homeowner or the renter at that time to make adjustments. We're just suggesting and giving our advice on how to lower that utility bill, which is different than the home scoring as well. Next slide, please. On this slide, this is a portion of our home energy survey. This is our back page. You'll see on here that we have no movement at our meter. Didn't see any leaks there. That's what all those okays are for. And then down on the comments, we like to highlight the main things we find in the homes. So though we do look at safety issues as well as how it's used, we're not looking at foundation issues or the home as a codes officer would look at it. We're looking at it as more of an efficiency standard. Next slide. So our key findings after meeting with the city are, although some of the processes are similar, home assessments are more extensive and would require GRU to invest time and resources. That would include more staffing, as well as we have a retiring fleet currently, so we would need more vehicles as well as more room to house people to do these home scoring. Home scoring is also just the energy efficiency part of the minimum rental housing inspection. So we would actually be duplicating the work. GRU staff could go perform the home survey, but then you would still need a code officer to come through and do the minimum rental housing inspection. We could also, combine those two, but then at what point do you draw the line between code officer and home energy survey? So GRU could revise its programs to incorporate home scoring, but would potentially need to revise all documentation and information to educate the requester about the home energy score, like the home survey example we provided. And the revision would be an additional cost for the utility. Adopting the methodology would require program expansions, additional staffing, budget, space considerations, and of course, vehicles. GRU would need to consider how its computer information system, CIS, would add and track home score information. It currently is not the same way the city operates. And then we would be adopting the home energy score methodology could require rewriting the ordinance minimally though from after reviewing. And I just wanted to add at the end of this slide, we do have Quentin Polly in the house who is also a residential efficiency program coordinator with the city of Gainesville to help answer questions with me.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Just have to be looking.
Just a comment. I understand the logic where we're coming from and it makes sense. And I don't see a need to push on this. But I do just want to say, I mean, as somebody that has watched sort of GRU's conservation activities over a pretty long period of time, I feel like we have kind of systematically disinvested from conservation programming. I mean, I remember a time when this utility won national awards for the work that it was doing around conservation. And with the exception of the LEAP program, which I think is blown up right now temporarily because of an influx of federal funding, I worry what's going to happen with our conservation programming once that federal funding, if and when it dries up. And I don't personally see these sorts of operations as niceties. I think they're absolutely essential. I don't think that given the carbon neutrality goals that this community has said it's striving for and that everyone needs to be striving for, that we can sell our way into that future just by building more power generation. And I know it's kind of counterintuitive for this business model to actually be investing dollars in getting its consumers to not buy its product. But as we've talked about with water, we have said that those additional amounts of water are going to come at tremendous cost. And so we have to invest in conserving water. And I think the same exact thing applies to energy if we're actually going to achieve significant serious reductions in carbon. So unless and until we get to the point where we can provide our customers with 100% renewable energy that we are selling them, I think we have to be making significant real investments in conservation. So I'm going to continue to beat that drum until you guys shut me up.
Thank you. Well said. Would you like to comment on that?
So let's like follow up. So we agree. I agree. We agree as a utility that conservation is absolutely part of the strategy going forward. And as we march toward net zero, I think in the integrated resource plan this time around, the inside management is absolutely going to be an element of that, which is obviously a commitment to how does conservation, what is that as how does conservation and demand side management become a part of our future generation needs and what that looks like. And so we are committed to that. And I don't think not doing home energy scores is a indication that we're not committed to conservation. I think coming out of the IRP, we're going to be looking at new and different ways that we're moving in conservation. We have a long history, like you said, of water and energy conservation, and that's going to continue. But there's also a history of sort of flexibility and adaptability, like it's changed over time of what that looks like. So I do want to just, I think when we evaluated this, the challenge was a resource challenge, frankly, or do we bring on additional resources to provide this? And what does that value look like compared to the cost of bringing on those resources? And I would say the answer here is at this time, this is the cost proposition doesn't make sense, but this may be something as we go forward. And actually, like I said, and how we address demand side management, that there might be opportunities to move in a direction similar to this or others in consultation. So
A question, so how much flexibility does GRU have to make decisions on, energy improvement, efficiency programs, or is that more driven by the city commission, or is it somewhere in between?
I mean, I think everything's kind of somewhere in between. We can make recommendations through the budget process and through projects or things of that nature, or changing staffing. We could reallocate staffing or add staff, those types of things. Those would all happen through the budgeting process with the city.
So if members of the public were interested in seeing more programs, Jason suggests, would their efforts be better spent on your doorstep or on the city commission's doorstep?
I would say probably both. I mean, so, the balance always is, you have revenue and you have expenses. And so if you're doing something to increase your expenses, you need to address the revenue side. And I think we've talked about this before in here. A big difference between GRU and other utilities is our rate of growth. So we don't have a revenue growth nearly as steep as a lot of other utilities. And so that is a challenge on the expense side of trying to keep our expenses down in order to keep the rates down.
Anything else from the board? Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah, I have a question. What about numbers? You do a before and after assessment of the KWH consumption at the location that you're talking about?
Randy, I'll let you answer that.
We currently are not. Historically, we have, we can. So if there's a customer who calls in and wants us to review that for them, we do have the data to be able to do that, but it's not offered in place at this moment.
But I mean, nationwide, there are numbers like a 10% savings after a home audit. I don't know what you're getting or what you got historically, but that's a national number. I think the UAB would be very interested in that, especially in terms of how it would affect the IRP. How many of these a year do you do?
Last year, we did 392. That was a smaller amount compared to normal. So far this year, we've already done, and this year, this fiscal year, so since October, we're up to 182 so far.
Well, I think the UAB would be very interested to see if you can provide some numbers for us, especially before the IRP is finished, to give us an idea of the cost benefit of these activities.
Now, I can tell you from the seat from Community Weatherization Coalition, typically after we've done the survey, gone in, worked with the customer, they save the equivalent of about a 1 month's bill. What's really interesting is 4 or 5 years later, they've seen the equivalent of about 2 months of bills of savings. So the savings actually grows over time, which is fantastic. But a question, thinking
Which
about
would be 18%.
Yeah,
Which is a lot bigger than 10%.
yeah, which is that. So how much effort, money, time would it take to be able to do what Fletcher's asking? Because we're just writing blank checks.
I think it's fairly straightforward to do an exercise where we're just looking at bills 1 year and the next. The challenge is always normalizing for weather. So weather has such a major impact on usage. So we could easily look at October of 22, October of 23, and what was the difference. But I think it's absolutely a worthwhile effort because it really is justifying the program. So if it's not making a difference in people's usage, then it's not a worthwhile program. So it is something we should be doing on a regular basis and something we can absolutely do as some analysis with that. The other thing I will just add, and again, I always hesitate to put too many eggs in this basket, but the reality is with the advanced metering infrastructure that's coming and that the grid is in place and we're adding meters at this moment, that'll provide a lot more available information for both the end user as well as GRU to be able to really see differences like programs like this provide. And so I think we're entering an era when we're going to have much more information that can inform us on our decision making on programs that work and that nature. So more to come on that. As we enter toward the end of this summer, we'll start getting really a big first segment of meters in the ground and start to be operational. And so that'll be a really kind of exciting time.
No, I spent a good chunk of my weekend looking at AMI data for another utility. They gave me 15-minute data for the year. We were looking at how solar going to impact demand management, and it was fantastic to have the numbers. I'm so excited about the win-win potentials of that. To your point about the weather impacts, if not to make it too complicated, if you could take that house relative to its neighbors one year versus the next year, some way to try and calculate this in the most minimal way, but still to be meaningful. For sure, yes. Anything else from the board? From the public?
I apologize. I forgot this key slide. If you would like me to read it. I'm sorry. While GRU sees merit in the home energy score methodology, the investment of time and resources required to blend this methodology into our current system is not currently practical. GRU should continue to perform bill or usage specific home energy surveys to help inform customers about significant energy producing loads and measures they can take to reduce their energy use.
Oh, I'm sorry. After this recommendation, we do have a couple board questions. Go ahead, Teresa.
I had a question. How many surveys are because of college students and them finally learning how to use energy properly? How many of that do you have during rush, or you have from parents calling about the bills that they get for the students? And what time do those bills analysis take to do with the students and the impact of that?
So students, I would say, wouldn't be more than a quarter. And honestly, that's because of a lot of our apartment complexes right now do the delayed billing. So we're actually billing the apartment complex, who then creates a billing format for their students or their tenants. So they're actually not seeing what they're using until 2 months after they actually used it. So then we get the calls and we do go into the homes, but only about a quarter of students really actually call us. It's less frequent. Most of our home surveys are due to an inconsistent pattern in billing, or people moving to Gainesville and just curious about the home that they're moving into. They want us to go and assess it and see how they can manage themselves or improve the home to lower their utility bill.
How long does it take to do an average survey?
For us here at GRU, it depends on the house size. We say anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. Student apartment housing is usually about an hour. But then you get the larger homes where we send 2 technicians out, and it can take up to 3 hours depending on how much we have to check.
Thank you. Scott?
Here, I'm going to chime in with my phone since I don't have my.
Citizens. Yep, exactly. All right, good evening, Nathan Scott. So again, I agree with the GRU recommendation. Frankly, it is not the role of the UAB, nor GRU, nor the city of Gainesville to embark upon rating homes according to some scoring methodology to support their renters' rights ordinance. That's just far afield. And part of the reason why GRU is in the mess is it is because we have this thinking, progressive thinking that has nothing to do with the core operation of the utility, and that's already financially distressed, resource constrained, can't read meters, and we're asking them to embark on things that are extracurricular activities when you're flunking out of school because you have the highest electric rates in the state of Florida for generating utility. So that being said, the IRP was mentioned in conjunction with this, some of the comments from the members. Again, IRP is great. It's what utilities normally do, except in this situation, we're trying to be woke and we're hiring a PR firm to the tune of $250,000 to go out and sell an IRP. You don't need a PR firm to sell an IRP. This money should have been used to immediately reduce GRU's already unaffordable electric rates. And that's the problem here is we keep trying to do all this cute stuff and not focus on what's important, because the reality, folks, for the people in the room that are dreaming, people can't afford their electric bills. You got an hour and a half customer service wait. I have to drive in to talk to customer service because you can't get them on the phone. You got meter readings that are inaccurate. They don't have the resources, and we're virtue signaling about this nonsense. So the bottom line is most people, including myself, couldn't really care where their electricity comes from a fuel source. That is a false narrative. If you told people that you'd have $63 rates higher than what FPL can deliver same unit quantity commodity electricity for, I think they'd be outraged at what's going on. Okay. So yes, some people are socially conscious. I like renewables, but not when they're unaffordable. Okay. And done in a fiscally irresponsible manner, which is how GRU got in this mess. And the UAB continues to facilitate that. We got in this mess because GRU's proven business generation planning model, you had a commission that substituted their energy policy choices for GRU's proven business model. That's exactly how you got into $1.7 billion worth of debt. That's how you got in the biomass contract. That's how you got in the feed-in tariff, which was fiscally irresponsible. If you had a supply and demand imbalance, you should have lowered the price on the feed-in tariff, got more solar at a lower price for GRU customers. And Reagan, that was a lost concept on him. Clueless. So again, most people don't care. They want low rates and reliability. That should be the focus of a utility under financial distress. Low rates, reliability. Anything else is secondary. And again, how we got in this mess, GRU's proven business model and strategic generation planning process was hijacked by a city commission that substituted their energy policy choices for GRU's proven business model. End of story. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this item? Non-natural gas.
So, Mr. Chair, we've had previous discussion on natural gas rebates. We're going to be taking this item to the City Commission, to the General Policy Committee in either late February or March, beginning of March. We're trying to fit it into the General Policy Committee schedule. And so we're here today to really kind of hear any additional questions or comments from the members here as we prepare for that. And I know there's been some additional discussion and information shared. So we're really here to answer any questions about that.
Okay, before we get into it, just a little background for everyone. So the City Commission directed the UAB to make a recommendation on the GRU natural gas rebate program, directed GRU staff to support this effort. A few meetings ago, actually back in 2022, so it was a motion that passed, not unanimously, one from unanimously, to make the recommendation to suspend the natural gas rebates for a year. GRU staff came back and said, hey, we'd like to give you some more information before that moves forward, which I appreciate. I've been asking for several years now, what are the numbers? Yeah, I am not, unsympathetic to GRU and to wanting to know what's the financial impact of doing these things, and just haven't had numbers. So I really was pleased to see some numbers finally coming out that I found useful, very specific numbers. So that's kind of what's in this presentation. This is a workshop, so to my knowledge, we can't vote on something like this, but if informally we say we'd like to make potentially a different vote based on this discussion, we could do that at the next meeting. Based on the discussion here, I'm going to contact the mayor to say how would he like this presented, when and how this presentation happens. Members would also be, of course, free to make any kind of suggestion presentation they would like to do. All right, Eric, thank you.
Okay. So Chair, members, Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer. And so we won't be making a formal presentation tonight. Just kind of, again, you kind of recapped it, but how we got here is there was a vote to recommend to the City Commission to discontinue natural gas rebates. And so subsequent to that, the general manager and myself and the chair met and had some discussions, and there was a request by the chair to provide some additional info. Specifically, that information that was requested was basically a definition of terms that we've been using up to that point. Kind of a case study of a neighborhood or a group of homes that have received a rebate, what the revenue was, and kind of an analysis of that point. And also a discussion of FGT, or not FGT, the GFT. Sorry, my mind is on gas and FGT came out. The GFT and the calculation of that. And so the presentation that was presented to the chair, and I think sent out to the rest of the board, kind of answered those three questions specifically. Subsequent to that, there were a few more questions, and the chair provided a subsequent spreadsheet for analysis and asked the staff to review. And so when we did that, mainly what we'll be answering is the response to that and our evaluation of that spreadsheet and that analysis. And then we want to just ask if there are any other additional questions that the UAB has regarding this issue.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eric, before you go there, just to ask, did you guys go through and understand the information that GRU provided or that I responded to? Or would you like to see that at this point, or do you want to dive into the next part?
I don't think I received it. Was it sent to the GRU email address or?
I always send everything to your private addresses.
This was in the backup for the last meeting, right? I believe it was.
No,
Oh,
no,
no.
it wasn't, but I did email it out to all of you on December
I
12th.
know I've seen it. I thought it was in the backup.
Okay, I missed it then.
Would you guys like this?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy if you guys don't want.
I'd like to, yeah, it's available, I'd like to look at.
Do you have it available where we could just show it real quick?
Talking about the, what,
The
response to
the PowerPoint that you sent.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's available, right?
Yeah.
Just make sure we have a useful discussion here. And then while they're bringing it up, because in the past, we would ask questions and we would get GRU sells this many million of natural gas. Okay, what's that have to do with rebates? And just, as we're talking about questions, they would say, oh, well, the revenue is this. Well, you're talking about, oh, it's a net revenue. Well, is that the same as gross profit? What does that mean? And so just definition of terms, just trying to get to a common understanding of some interesting number of the numbers and what we're sort of talking about the same facts. And as I told, Eric and Tony, we may come to very different decisions and interpretation, but I want to hopefully be on the same page of what do these numbers mean and go from there.
Okay, so if we go through this natural gas, this is a direct response to the questions that the chair asked the staff to respond to. First is a clarification of net revenue. First, net revenue is a customer revenue that includes the customer charge, non-fuel energy charge, any manufactured gas plant recovery, and also the gas surcharge for those that are outside the city limits. The fuel is considered a pass-through and is not included in this revenue calculation. Natural gas's delivery is largely a fixed cost business, so any incremental overhead in O&M is largely ignored in this, simply because it's accounted for other places or it's accounted for in the cost of the infrastructure that's already there. And unless otherwise stated, depreciation and debt service is usually not considered when you're talking about net revenue.
And just a question on that. Within GRU territory, whether people are using natural gas or not, they're already out there reading the meters, but as we go into non-GRU electric customers, that is a separate meter read, a separate bill, so do you have any idea what those costs?
Because it's incremental, typically there's no additional measurable cost that we have to that. We use the same folks, the same people, the same infrastructure to do that. And so there's no appreciable cost that's associated with that. And if it is, it's accounted for in another department. So it's not included in the revenues here.
You're saying if you're going into territory where there are no other meters.
No other GRU meter.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, there are gas customers that are outside of even the water wastewater, but most, I believe, Tony, I don't know if you answer that, but most of our gas customers are at least within electric, water, or electric or water kind of territory.
Yes.
So they're going to read a water meter. It might not be in our electric territory, but it would be within our water territory.
That helps, thank you.
So the next question was talk about residential and non-residential revenue and the contribution to the GFT. So this is really a synopsis of what happens with the revenue. And so when we look at this, we've got outlined here for the fiscal years ending September 20 and 21. You see the numbers and the revenue associated with residential and non-residential gas customers. That simply rolls up into the calculation of the GFT. The calculation of the GFT is simply a top-down calculation. It is based on the percentage of overall revenues, non-fuel revenues, and it's based on the total GFT that's assigned to us that year or that's agreed upon from general government. And it's basically divided out by percentage at that point. So in other words, for example, these are not real numbers. For example, if the total percentage of revenue for gas was 10%, then it would be assigned 10% of the overall GFT. There is no other calculation. It's more of a top down. There is no bottom up. There is no assignment per customer, residential, non-residential. That calculation, it doesn't come into play. It is simply a percentage of overall revenues for that system that is assigned to.
So I know our former chair asked some questions about, that in his opinion, that seemed like a very high GFT percentage. Can you address his concerns?
His concerns are his concerns, but the calculation is based on percentage of revenues. That's the simple calculation.
I don't know offhand, like in the 20 some odd percent was going to GFT. Was his calculation correct? I'm not judging.
The calculation here that is shown is based on percentage of revenues per system. That's the only calculation.
And it's non-fuel revenue, as Eric said. So you're taking out the PGA cost and you're doing it based on that. So that's just how, essentially each system within GRU is its own enterprise fund and it has to pay all of its costs. The GFT is a cost that is allocated out to each system and it's allocated out based upon that, the revenue that each system is generating. And then they're paying the portion, as Eric said, the GFT that's $32 million that year. You look at the percentage of revenue for each system and you're allocating it out, that 32 million to each system in that manner. That's the methodology that we use, and that's a sound methodology that our financial advisors and our bond counsel recommend and support.
So just to be clear, so in this case, we are looking at over 20% of non-fuel revenues going to the GFT. Is it? I mean, again, to me, that does sound like a really high number, but you're saying that that's correct.
I'm not asserting to the correctness of the former chair's calculation. What I am saying is this calculation is the one that we do business on and base it on. Sure. It is strictly a top-down approach. I am not addressing his calculation.
Well, I'm just saying, if you take the 2.46 million and divide it by the 11.8 net revenue, that's going to give you well over 20%. So just for a reminder, is that 20%? Would that be applied to all?
I think what we would have to do is have a real understanding of the overall revenues and what the percentage calculation was for that year. So yes, it's broken down by percentage of net revenue for each system, and the allocation of the GFT is simply multiplied by that percentage. That's the calculation.
I'm trying to understand the method. So is there more than the 11.8 million? My eyes are good enough.
Not in the gas system, no.
So is there a reason why you can't take the 2.4 and divide it into 11.8 and get the GFT percentage?
Total gross revenue would be 25 million.
Yeah, if you go back to the previous slide. So I mean, that's the math. So if you look at total revenues, it's 26 million. That's your total revenues in the gas system.
That includes the
so subtract the 9.2 and you're down to around 17 million. Divided 2.4 divided by 17. I was trying to do it real quick, about 14%. And I think that makes sense. I mean, I need to look at each of them, but I think that typically is around 14 or 15% of net of revenues is what your GFT is.
And so again, this is just for my understanding. So that was what you're saying, if I understood what you said before, that all departments would be paying in that 14-15% of revenues, of net revenues to the.
So the math quick here, but yes, that is the approach and that's what it should be. Okay, that's makes sense with that 2.4 million.
Not disagreeing, not arguing, just for understanding. Thank you.
And so just for clarity, if you look over, so I've been here for 21 years. If you look over the 21 years, there's been different methodologies that have been used. There used to be a set number, it used to be 14.65%. That was just applied to all systems. And then there were different methodologies that were used over the years. Currently, what we're using is the net revenues of the revenues by system and using that as a percentage breakdown. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Again, this is just derived to make sure we're all as much as possible on the same page and there's.
All right, so essentially, as we showed before in FY21, residential base rate revenues were 8.7 million, non-residential were 5.7. While it's not possible to parse out GFT transfer among those customer classes, it's reasonable that a significant portion of the 2.4 comes from the residential customers. And that's simply by the first breakdown. We don't calculate the GFT according to commercial or non-commercial. It's just an estimation to answer your specific question.
So, but if you took the 8.7 times the 14%, that would tell you how much GFT would be required. Is that correct?
Because the GFT is calculated based on the total percentage of revenue, it's an estimation. So it's an estimation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the third question that the chair had was related to a case study. And the emphasis of the question was, let's look at an area, a neighborhood, and kind of do the analysis based on those typical things, right? So when staff went back and looked at that, they were trying to find a residential area that met certain criteria, right? The main part of that was subsequent to 2016, because the records before 2016 for rebate data were kind of sketchy, right? So as we go forward, we want to make sure that the data is accurate, and that started around 2016. So something subsequent to that, looking for an area that had some kind of history that we could point back to, but wasn't extremely wide, right? So if something lasted over 10 or 12 years, we didn't consider that as a viable option, simply because so many things have changed over that 10 to 12 year period. We wanted to try and keep it succinct. And also just making sure that we had enough data to really do any kind of subsequent analysis on that. So as a result of that, and using that criteria, there were 2 or 3 neighborhoods that were looked at, and ultimately Arbor Greens was chosen as the neighborhood to do the case study on. So they evaluated the residences where natural gas rebates were issued. A single neighborhood was selected, and with relatively recent construction from the numbers that we talked about, or for the reasons that we talked about. So Arbor Greens was built in multiple phases with multiple builders. Homes range anywhere from 1,800 to 3,000 square feet. Phase 2 began construction in 2017. And so when staff went back and evaluated, we looked at homes built from 2017 to 2020. We looked at the rebates paid, revenues earned, infrastructure invested, and also a simple payback period for those. So looking at, I know this chart has a lot of numbers on it, but let's walk through it here briefly. We have, looking at 4 years, roughly 2017 through 2020. You have a number of homes that are receiving that rebate, and here's a calculation of the number of homes that received the rebates those years based on those phases. You have an average infrastructure investment per home of roughly $1,922. And the reason that is done is the same across all of those years, is basically we took a look at the overall infrastructure cost for that phase, and then we simply divided it by the number of homes that were available there. So it wasn't an individual account of the infrastructure cost. It was simply the overall, and then applied to the number of homes evenly. Then we took a look at the average depreciation of the asset in years. And for accounting purposes in BFA, they use 21 years in depreciation for assets in the system. So we took the same number of years for that. We also looked at the average rebate issued. And the average rebate issues, that number changes because it all depends on what kind of appliances were installed in that home. So all the homes didn't install the same types of appliances or number of appliances. So that's why that number varies, but it's based on the appliances and the rebates that were accepted for that. So when you look at the average non-fuel revenue per home, again, that's all the things that we discussed in the second slide, customer charges and so forth. You get your revenue here. You get the annual depreciation or average depreciation per home comes out to the $87, and it's simply the infrastructure divided by the 21 years, and you get that depreciation, even depreciation over that time. Once you back out the depreciation, your average net revenue is roughly roughly around $200, between $189 and $220 there. And the average rebate payback in years. And again, that's simple payback. So simple payback backs out this depreciation number. Okay. So simple payback looking at the overall revenues here, get you an average payback in years of roughly 6 years. So a few notes here. Total infrastructure investment for this was $33,000. I wish it was 133. Revenue does not include fuel, state taxes, anything like that, because again, fuel is rated as a pass-through. Taxes are not something that we keep. And typical asset life is longer than 20 years, but we use 21 years, but we use that figure to basically match the depreciation schedule of the assets in the system. So payback period is about 6 years, as we said. Simple payback, including all infrastructure on top of that and the rebate, is roughly 11 years. Net revenue averages around 220 years after depreciation. But again, these calculations are done before. And then incremental overhead is difficult to identify and is generally excluded from these calculations.
I'm sorry, can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
So why did the average net revenue drop from 308 in 2020, and then I think the next slide says it goes to averages 220 after that?
Yeah, the number that's included on the next slide is inclusive of depreciation. So you're looking here.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a note, the natural gas staff does an economic evaluation before deciding to even run infrastructure to a desired neighborhood or area. We do an IRR and make a determination of whether we can actually make the money invested back from that investment.
A question on that. So, like, first, is this a non-GRU electrical customer neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay. So if the exact same neighborhood, but they are a GRU electrical customer comes in, is that included in the evaluation to say there probably won't be any additional revenues switching them from natural gas, from electricity to natural gas?
No, we didn't do that calculation because this case study was strictly outside of our electric.
But just in general, when you're doing this economic evaluation, deciding whether to install infrastructure in the neighborhood, is that just done from a natural gas point of view, or is the change in electrical revenues?
It's simply done from a natural gas revenue standpoint.
If you did, it's one of those, if you did it, it would be prejudiced in a way, I guess, but okay, thank you.
And that's it. That's the totality of the presentation that we provided to the chair.
Any questions before we go on to I had additional questions that spreadsheet that I provided. Any questions on this presentation?
Just one, it's just that last statement on the last slide there about staff does an economic evaluation before making it. So does that mean then that literally on a case-by-case basis, you could look at these rebates and say, well, all inclusive, this makes good economic sense for us to do, so we're going to do it over here, but right here we're not going to?
So chair members, there's two things that go along with that. We can't make the determination whether we offer rebates specifically inside and outside. If we're offering one, we have to offer to all. So we have to provide that opportunity to everyone. Otherwise, it could be misconstrued as preferential treatment and other legal terms that I don't want to get into. And secondly, the IRR is done absent of the rebate. So if we issued no rebate at all, what would that IRR be for infrastructure costs, labor, install, all of those things?
Thank you.
So the IRR will be significantly reduced because of the rebate.
If you added in the rebate, possibly, but yes, yeah, it would just extend the time that you're recouped. So it would effectively go from 6 years to 11 years.
So I'm just thinking out loud. So does this analysis affect the charge that you charge for the infrastructure? What does the analysis do? What do you do with the results of the analysis?
For
Like if you're looking at this neighborhood and say, okay, this one I got, because you're putting in infrastructure. What do you've done an analysis and you've got an IRR. What do you do with that now?
that's simply a determination of a go, no go, right? If we're not going to recoup our costs for that, then the answer would be we're not going to extend infrastructure to that area, right?
But you're charging for the infrastructure, so how can you not recoup?
The IRR is a determination of whether we do install. So if it doesn't meet the threshold, then we do not install. We don't incur those costs.
Yeah. Okay.
In those cases, we're paying for the infrastructure.
Okay. Okay. So you're not recouping. Yeah, that's right. You're not recouping.
Saying, hey, it's not worth it to put infrastructure in this
Not
neighborhood.
worth it. If there's two homes in the neighborhood getting rebate, you're not spending $100,000. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
So I had a few comments. I don't know if this is the time to make them or after, if you want to go through some of your stuff.
Well, I guess I was hoping that Eric was going to address the spreadsheet that I sent you guys to say, is it accurate?
Yeah, I do have some notes there. I was just waiting for this to kind of conclude with the presentation.
I think we're concluded with the presentation.
Okay. Tony, do you want to make comments now or you want to go directly into it? Okay. So I'm sorry, I did not make a slide of the presentation of the spreadsheet that was presented to us by Chair Jacobson. But our staff did go through and recommend some changes to it. We had some high level concerns with the calculation based on what we've shown and the purpose of the analysis. So the first change that we recommend is basically removing the monthly customer expenses. As we've talked about, reading meters, billing, all of those things, those costs are accounted for in other areas, and it's not right to include them in this analysis. The second is there was a factor of 45% that was added to the revenue. And I believe the basis was on a calculation of percentage of rebates inside the electric service territory versus outside the electric service territory. We completely removed that factor. It is based on a calculation of at that time, and it was actually a couple of years old when that percentage came about. And plus, all of this case study was purely outside of the electric service territory. So that the application of that 45% was removed because it wasn't applicable here.
Well, let me stop you here real quick and just to describe what I did. Basically, what I did is I tried to go through and take what GRU presented and put it in a spreadsheet. So first, I just want to make sure I got it right. I said, okay, you're in 2017, 11 customers, got these many rebates. Here was the infrastructure charge, and just as I do for any economic analysis, just go down year by year, line by line. Yeah, that monthly customer expense, I think we could have a discussion to say that's not zero. I don't like, but what it is, and that's why I made it a variable. I showed them an example with it zero. I showed them an example with it not zero, just to see the sensitivity of that. So just running those numbers, it's what I came up with was a 6.5% IRR and a 12.5 year simple payback or break even point, which is a little different, not wildly different, but a little different. So were there any issues with what I had done there?
Right. So what I'm saying is I'm addressing the factors that were put into that spreadsheet. And so we did remove the customer charge, the $5 customer charge. We took that away. There was an application of a 45% to the revenues that was completely removed because all of those revenues are included.
Well, if I could address that. So what I was attempting to do there is, and I'm not sure 45 is still the right number, is to say 55% of the time, that's the analysis. 45% of the time, you really generously net revenue, net zero, based on what we were told by GR staffs in the past, that they're not going to buy, okay, they're going to run that furnace, they're not gonna buy electricity, they're gonna buy natural gas, that the net revenue impact of that switch is probably net negative for GRU.
Right, but in the instance of this calculation, that isn't the case, because there was no conversion from electric to natural
No,
gas.
but that's why-
All purely natural
I
gas.
waited to say, in the big picture, if we looked across GRU territory, it's that some of the time it would be, they make revenue, some of the time they wouldn't. Let's combine those things to see the net impact of that.
So that's why it was removed, because it was applied to data that was a specific case for a specific set of data. It wasn't across the GRU territory. So it wasn't a proper application of the 45%. And so that's why it was removed.
I think Eric's describing why we didn't do it in this case study, because it doesn't apply to the case study. I think the point you're making is when we do the analysis on a customer that is an electric customer, I think what you're suggesting is we should treat that differently in terms of the analysis, because we're losing electric revenue by transferring it to a gas customer, right?
Yeah. So if this neighborhood were in the electric territory, and again, generously called it net zero change in revenue, we'd be looking at $220,000 in expense with no. And so I'm trying to extrapolate what we've learned here, because as Jason has asked the question numerous times, he keeps being told no, not that it's the wrong answer, is we can't discriminate and say, let's just do it outside of GRU electric.
Right.
So that was my goal. I mean, if that's not, if there's a problem with that, I'd like to know.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so I think it's worth us considering how we do our calculation and all of that for a customer that has both. So I think that's a worthy thing to sort of take away and consider. So I think that's helpful.
So what is the split now, just so we can use the right numbers?
You mean external to internal? I believe the last numbers we presented were 54 external, 46 internal.
Okay, so the 45 was about.
The percentage was, the application here was not. We removed that application to this data.
But I hate to guess this on the fly, but guess would be most like more going forward. Split's gonna become more outside than inside. It's like, it's not that 54% of every customer we come it's probably gonna be more of the growth is going to be outside of our electric service territory than in, which is one of the reasons our recommendation is what it is because that more growth is happening in service territory.
Right, thank you. Go ahead.
And so when we did our analysis and subsequently when we got some of the questions, we did both of those questions as far as infrastructure cost. And so we initially removed the infrastructure cost from the spreadsheet, but realizing we could add them in or take them out, it changes the payback time. And we've addressed that in the presentation. The non-fuel revenue, other additional concerns, the non-fuel revenue is flat throughout the entire projection. And in reality, we believe those rates would increase. And the monthly customer charges were also removed. It's the incremental revenue. It's based on the incremental customer, and that's incremental revenue that's added to the system. So a monthly customer cost is largely fixed. And so therefore the variable cost is significantly inflated if you add that into the calculation, right? So once we add in the infrastructure cost and we account for that, there's no additional customer cost that goes along with that. So that one was removed as well.
And is this still the 5% number?
No, there was a monthly customer expenses column in your calculation. And it looked like it was roughly $3,900 for a number of years. Fifth column over, really.
If you set that to zero, if you set monthly customer expense, that's your number to zero way.
Right. So once we take a look at that and remove the factors that we talked about for the reasons that we discussed, it really comes back to the same calculations and numbers that we presented. And so there doesn't appear to be any conflicting facts after those factors are removed.
Okay, thank you. So I would be interested to see why you said 11 years and mine says 12 and a half. even with the monthly factor removed. Not a big deal, but the other, and just to make sure we're all on the same page of why I said, if we can consider this representative, and is it fair to consider this a representative neighborhood?
The reason we chose this neighborhood was for the specific reasons is it was completely outside of our electric service territory.
Sure.
Was more recent. It showed a recent phase. We had historical data that we could analyze. And we wanted to make sure we did an analysis of that. Is it representative of all the rebates that we give out across our territory? No. It is purely a case study. It is a historical look at that data and the analysis. And so, yeah, it's a historical look at it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one data point. It's a new neighborhood, so it should be relatively representative of other new neighborhoods.
Correct. We expect the new neighborhoods that come online or that would come online to look similar to this.
So again, I'm not sure why you object to the idea of saying, well, let's say that 55% of the neighborhoods look like this. That are, 55% of the time, their neighborhoods outside GRU territory, 45% they're inside GRU territory. Let's see what the blended, return on investment looks like there.
For this particular case study, and that's what we're responding to. For this particular case study, that does not apply, that revenue factor.
But I'm trying to extrapolate from that to a larger picture of inside and outside of GRU territory.
Again, I think, Mr. Chair, the growth going forward is not plan. Like, so growth going forward is a lot more outside of our service territory. So
Again, we're not sure, but we could take a look at different, sensitivity of it. But for the board's information, with the current split, the rebates never pay for themselves. At the end of 25 years, we're still net negative. I can sit here and play and see, if it goes to 60-40, it takes 20 years to hit break even. And so on. At some point, it gets at 35, 65, 35, it's still at 19 years. So it's a pretty important fact. And again, this is generously calling it a net neutral within GRU territory.
I can't comment on those calculations. It's your
question
calculation.
then would be, how do we, this is the best information I have for us to make a decision on what's the impact of rebate changes to GRU, unless you guys have something more useful to offer.
We just had a presentation saying that we had a 6-year break-even point. Now you're saying it's a 20-year break-even point.
Well, just for this neighborhood, they said it was 11 years, and I said 12 and a half. So we're not.
Well, but those are very significantly different numbers.
So the difference here, Eric is talking about one specific case study in one specific neighborhood. Barry's trying to extrapolate to bigger picture rebates across the entire system. So that's where these differences in numbers are coming from. And it makes sense. It's two different stories.
Well, the 11 versus 12 and a half are based on the exact same data set. So it would be interesting to see why they're different. It's not an enormous difference that I would love to spend a lot of time on, but the blended is an important question, for when we're saying, what's the net, based on what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing new revenues for GRU that we're barely breaking even at best with these rebates.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what to do at this point. I don't agree with that. I think it does show that additional revenue. So I don't, maybe we need to sit down and kind of go through it again in more detail. I don't know how helpful it is to do it right now.
So if you had this exact same neighborhood again, and I don't want to just beat this to death, out inside GRU territory.
I think there's some merit for us to look at doing the IRR different, looking at that difference inside the territory versus out.
Well, basically, again, you'd be looking at $220,000 of expense with probably less revenue than you started with, if you for an equivalent neighborhood inside of your territory. Would you? I don't. You don't have to. I don't mean to put you on.
We were focusing on the case study for this analysis, so
I'm saying for this exact case study inside your territory, would you agree with my assessment that there are no additional revenue? I'm saying that based on what we were told by GRU staff in the past.
I would say as we look at each situation, we're doing an analysis to determine whether we're going to make money or not make money. And if we're not going to make profit off of it, we're not going to engage in that.
But what I was told is that you're not taking into account the move from natural gas, electric to natural gas, which is
When we did, Chair, when we did this analysis, the specific question was looking at a neighborhood that was fairly new, that had installs of natural gas and the recruitment rate of that rebate. So that is the question that we answered. To verify your numbers, we did not do that analysis. I can't confirm or deny. That sounds very political, doesn't it? I sound like I'm in Congress. I can't confirm or deny the validity of those numbers because that's not the analysis that we did. The analysis that we did was a specific response to your question. It is outside the electric service territory. There was no conversion from electric to natural gas. And so therefore we would have to look at that analysis differently. I can't agree or disagree to that. I haven't done the analysis.
and I appreciate what you guys have done. Honestly, I do have a little frustration that we weren't able to do more of this discussion outside of this forum. First, to save you guys time and just not in a public place that we could have, asked these questions, gotten these answers, and not done it here, but it is what it is. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. And I understand looking at this from a rate of return, because if we go ahead and do something like this, but it seems to me that a lot of other people are doing it. Some, what do you call it? You look around, what do you call it? And you look at rebates, what do you call them? Different companies. There's a lot of them doing it. So somebody must have thought it was a good idea. And we're going to have to compete with those same people. If we don't, so I look at this a little bit as a competitive issue also.
And I appreciate that. I guess my take on that is, and maybe Jason at this point, is that our rebates, as GRU staff has pointed out, are significantly less than other rebates, the other utilities. So our big rebates, I don't believe, are stopping other utilities from coming in, because as we all, I'll say this a little tongue in cheek, as a contractors will go over who's going to give them the next dollar. And so if it were worth their money for them to come in here, we're not stopping, in my opinion, with our rebates being lower. I mean, you do make a good point of what do we know that nobody else knows? We're saying that's not to the rebate, but I'm waiting. I'd be happy to entertain the answer to that. If there's something that I'm missing, I would love to know.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, what I would say overall is, if you look at the business overall, we're making a profit, we're making money off of our natural gas system with the format that it's in. We have $2.4 million being attributed to the GFT. So that's, to me, that's the big picture. You look at how we're running the business, and there is a profit in the business. I feel like we're just running in circles here, and I'm not sure how profitable it is for us to continue to do that, but I think it's important to step back and look at that. And I guess, again, my comments are, the discussion is, should we continue rebates or not? Because of the concerns of our march away from fossil fuel and our net zero resolution. And I think as we as staff have done the analysis and the recommendation that we brought to the UAB and that we're taking to the city commission is, at this time, we should continue to do natural gas rebates from a number of reasons, that we kind of listened. At this time, it is decreasing the overall CO2 emissions. Now, as we move forward and our electric generation becomes more renewable, that's going to change. But at this time, it's reducing those. It's reducing our peak electric demand at this time. And again, as it lowers our customer. Everybody understands, if you're a GRU customer, you want a lower bill. Customers that have natural gas have lower bills individually.
I'm sorry, is that currently true? I know that was true a few years ago.
I think it still is true with the PGA, like where the purchase gas adjustment is, it still is a more efficient. We do have annual revenue growth. So I know this conversation is about that. And I think it's a worthwhile conversation in making sure how we're doing our IRR is demonstrating we don't enter into a engagement or an investment unless we have that. But so in doing that, we're doing that. And then I think that the other piece that we've talked about is and this is kind of what you were alluding to, if we're in the business and we're providing natural gas, we're controlling that future supply. And especially outside our service area, that is something that we can have control of. Whereas if other utilities that were outside of our electric service territory are providing power and they're not moving towards renewable power, natural gas is a more efficient fuel, less CO2 emissions than the power that they're providing. Secondly, as we march into the future, there might be opportunities for us to provide, renewable natural gas, or, we talked about in the sky hydrogen. There might be those opportunities, and if we have that market, we have the ability as a utility to do that. If we don't have that market, we don't. And I think there's this big outstanding question that I've said it here, I don't know the answer to, which is, if we stop providing natural gas rebates, are we going to stop providing natural gas? If we stop providing natural gas, are competitors going to come into our marketplace? I don't know that. We don't know that, whether that's one or other, but it is a possibility. And I think that's a concern that we have, is we could be marching toward net zero, but someone else could be doing something very different in our territory, our area. So for those reasons, at this time, we continue to recommend that moving forward with natural gas rebates is important. I think there will be a time when we start transitioning out. And one of the things we wanted to do was walk through the integrated resource planning process and look at how this fits into that, instead of making a decision that we may not be able to come back from without knowing the consequence or the conclusion of that. And so that is where we continue to stay as staff, and what we're planning on recommending to the city commission, also bringing what your all's comments and recommendations are, so they understand that as well. So I just want to kind of conclude back to that big picture and why we are landing where we're landing at this time. And again, our recommendation was to reevaluate this as we complete the integrated resource plan, as we get more information and data on potentially if others would be coming into our area and serving or not. Which again, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. No, and I appreciate that. When we were directed by the city commission to make a recommendation, I take that very seriously. And I don't, again, just go, let's just turn off natural gas. We'll just be all solar. It'll be great. That's just not reasonable. So one of the questions is, just forget everything else. What's the financial implication to GRU and GFT and all that stuff of these natural gas rebates? Let's put our heads together and get the best understanding what that's going to be. So that was the goal of this exercise. And then to factor in, we're trying to get to 100% renewables and all that later on in that discussion. So I appreciate you guys' indulgence. Anything else from the board at this point on this matter?
Yeah, I've got a question. How many new customers receive this rebate on average every year?
It's a great question. I think I'm going to divert to Thomas in the back. He has a better understanding of that, the number of customers.
The question was, how many customers receive rebates annually?
Well, the number of new ones each year. Either 50, I don't know.
No, it's usually about
500. Okay. And on average, how much GFT does each one of those customers generate?
We don't calculate it that way.
Well, but we saw the numbers up here.
So again, the calculation of the GFT is simply based on net non-fuel revenue.
We have a net revenue.
Theoretically, I want to be a little careful here, but theoretically, it would be around 14% of the revenue from those customers.
From that average customer.
Right.
Using the $308 of net revenue that was in the presentation
Per customer.
per customer, that's
500 customers.
that's 154,000 times the 14% is 21,500.
Comes up to $21,000. All right. So the treasury of city of Gainesville would be reduced by $21,000 for each year that you didn't have the rebates, right?
Well, that's not including the infrastructure costs, yeah, or the rebate costs.
I want to make sure, because there is a lot of speculation and throwing numbers out that have not been verified, vetted, calculated. I want to make sure that we are taking that caution. Okay. The UAB as individuals have that right to do that. We as staff don't have that right. So what we present to you has to be vetted. It has to be done in a responsible way to make sure that the information that we are presenting to you is correct and accurate as possible as we know it. So we're not going to comment on how much of each customer contributes to the GFT simply because we don't have that data. We don't calculate it. We simply don't. And so for us to speculate on that, I think is jumping to conclusions and making assumptions that we're not at liberty to make, to verify or to not verify. And so I want to be careful about that.
And I appreciate you saying that, because it is easy for us to get myself to get frustrated, like, come on, and
the issue is that if we say yes or no, guess what happens? Right? That gets published. It's fact. It's not fact. We haven't verified it. We don't calculate it that way. So in the protection of the staff and my staff that's now responding to this, I want to make sure that that's clear.
So, Mr. Chair, so in general, any contribution, any additional revenue and contribution in the gas system is going to be go toward that additional revenue. Portion of that is going to go toward the GFT, which is a set number, which then lowers the amount that other systems are paying for GFT. Or conversely, if you take out the gas system and the amount it contributes, then the other systems need to increase the amount of GFT. So it does overall have a negative, like a reduction in rate pressure to other systems by adding additional revenue in the gas system. And that shouldn't drive all of the decision of what we do, but it should, we need to understand as we make decisions like this, what the impacts are to other systems. And that is a impact. It's a small impact, and we're talking about precise numbers that we don't want to make up on the fly, but it is overall, that is an impact.
I'd like to direct a question to Tony. Tony, you said several times you'd like to see this deferred a while till you go to the IRP.
Mm-hmm.
Do you suppose you'd be in a better position, what do you call it, at the conclusion of the IRP to answer a question like this?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I think going through the IRP, giving us additional time to collect information just about, like I said, the impact potentially of others coming to the area and understanding. So the IRP, we're trying to lay out the roadmap to net zero, and that's not a stepwise thing. We're not saying, well, in 5 years we're going to be net zero. We're looking at incrementally adjusting as we work there, and this is a part of that incremental adjustment. And so I think it's important to look at that holistically as a utility, and because again, we need to balance several things here as we march forward, and revenues are part of that balance. The carbon emissions are part of that balance. How we impact customers and their bills are all part of that balance. And so the preference that we would have is to be looking at this holistically along with those other elements as well. We're not ignoring the fact, we're trying to say we shouldn't be looking at it, but it should be a transition. And we need to do that wisely and prudently for our customers and for our community.
Yeah, and I can appreciate it. Go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, as you pointed out in the recap in the beginning, this board took a vote, made a decision on this. I appreciate the extra analysis that you've done and that you guys have done in response. Unless there's been significant change of hearts and minds, we have a recommendation on the table. Staff feels one way, majority of this board feels another way. I think we both make our cases to the commission, and ultimately they're the ones that are going to decide. And I personally, I'm ready to move on from this. If
I'll second that. I'm up to my eyebrows in this discussion. We've gotten nowhere.
Down in the weeds for a long time.
And then again, appreciate your indulgence. This was the first time we've had actual data that we could, at least, I know it's one day, one neighborhood, one data point extrapolations, but when all you have is one data point, that's all you can do. My R squared is one though, so I feel pretty good about that. Before we do a straw vote, I believe we have a member of the public who would like to comment on this issue. Oh, okay.
Yes, good evening, Nathan Scott. So with respect to the rebates, I know there's a split opinion here. Again, UAB can recommend anything it wants. City Commission probably isn't going to listen to you guys either. They don't listen to anyone. They don't listen to GRU. They don't listen to UAB. They don't listen to citizens. With respect to the rebates, I'm gonna tell you folks, I'm 50, almost 56. I've had electric water heaters. I've had gas water heaters, had my current water heater in my current home that I bought when it was new. Gas fired water heater works infinitely better than and far more efficient than the electric water heater. So this push to, Biden administration, this local push, you get a ban, California push, we're going to ban natural gas use in homes, can't use gas to cook with, can't do this, can't do that. This whole electrification is now the buzzword. Where do y'all folks think electricity comes from? Most part in America, it's natural gas fired generation, particularly in Florida. So that's the lunacy of the discussion being had. Something that concerned me in terms of and it should concern you guys too, because again, if the UAB doesn't engage and we don't fix some of these holistic problems with UAB, state action is going to be the remedy. Just like state action was a remedy for the audit where the commission said, oh, there's nothing to see here. Validated all the concerns that citizens had brought forth that the commission negligently ignored for a decade. Debt, GRU, problems in city finance. So again, at the legislative delegation, there's a lot of interest when I raise a question about a proceeding before the PSC as to GRU's rate structure. These questions went unanswered tonight. We talked about, well, we're just going to allocate it. We're not going to distinguish between residential customers. We're just going to burden things indiscriminately for the general fund allocation between each utility system. That's not the way rates should be set. Rates should be set commensurate with cost of service for each customer class within a specific system. That's not what's being done. There are rate structure inequities across the electric system, across the gas system. And I would encourage GRU to take a holistic approach and look at this because it should be commensurate with cost of service for providing to residential customers and to commercial customers. It shouldn't be, oh, we're just going to wing it and it's going to be 14%, because that's not what happened. Because we want to go plot the general fund allocation by system from 2014 to present. You can see wild $7 million swings from year to year, where electric $7 million higher, gas is $8 million higher the next year, and then it reverses itself. It's like a pendulum rotating. That's not the way rate structure and rate should be set. That's ripe for state review. So those are some of the holistic problems we need to look at because those drive rates. Revenue requirement drives rates. So again, I like my natural gas. I think that there's a lot of discussion spent on these ideas. They may be well intended, but at the end of the day, those aren't the problems facing this utility that we need to solve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sproul. I don't always agree with everything Mr. Scott says, but it does seem awfully simplistic to have flat across, and I'm hoping the IRP can address that. And a lot of people think I need natural gas. I have natural gas furnace, natural gas water heater at my house, so I am not saying turn off the pipes.
Can this citizen make a comment?
Yes, this citizen is welcome to make a comment. Thank you. Yeah, sat here all night and have earned right.
I'll stop before the bell goes off. Chair, members. My name is Jay Rosenbeck. I co-chair the Natural Resources Committee of the League of Women Voters of Alachua County. And tonight I am speaking for the League's board and its 300 plus members. They and I, as their spokesperson, urge the UAB to once again recommend to the City Commission that GRU discontinue natural gas rebates. They know, the members know, as do all or most of you, that adding long-term fossil fuel customers is incompatible with the city of Gainesville's 2018 commitment to moving toward 100% clean renewable energy. They know, as do most or all of you, the potential disastrous environmental health and economic effects of methane and other greenhouse gases. I and the other league members also recognize that it is best left to you and other experts to evaluate the importance of data, as you have done for some time here today, and other arguments used in their support, the support for the rebates. But leaving that to you leaves us with two important issues that I'd like to bring up. First, members of the League of Women Voters of Alachua County, represented tonight by me, really urge all of us in leadership to reject business as usual, and increasing our city's reliance on natural gas is just that, business as usual, and we don't have time. The urgency of now is very real. And second, the league would like to emphasize their pride in being citizens committed to the new business of electrifying everything and becoming a model of the resilient, healthy, prosperous, inclusive city of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are comments from the public? Hearing none, so that we can't vote. I think we can take a straw vote. Do we stay the course? Or are you interested in discussing more at a future meeting and potentially re-voting?
Happy with the recommendation.
Me too. What was the recommendation?
GRU, the one that you voted against, the GRU discontinue its gas rebates. Basically, it was the recommendation that the staff brought, but would discontinue instead of continue at this time. Discontinue at this time to revisit it in the future. I'm happy to look up the language, but
I think what Jason's suggesting is we just go forward, don't address this again. Does anyone feel differently from that? If there's any reason to talk more? Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I just do have one question. So when we take it to the commission, we will take the motion to them. We'll explain the motion in the agenda. If you all want additional information or backup or want to come and speak as a UAB, as a chair, or as an individual, you're welcome to do that. It's hard to kind of characterize for us to characterize everything that the UAB is trying to share. So my point is if you want more information in the motion, that'll be the UAB's. The UAB will need to take that action.
Okay. All right. So, right. Yeah. And just the point of order. So typically, I would assume that our motions, our recommendations don't go through GRU to the city commission or
Yeah, we do. So we put them on the agenda. The recommendation from so basically an agenda item with the city commission, if the UAB has taken a motion on it, we'll put our staff recommendation and then we'll put UAB recommendation in the agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
Like I said, if you have additional backup or other information, you need to provide that. You can provide it to us and we can put it in there, but that would be something that you would need to provide.
Okay, thank you. So
can we be provided, since there was some uncertainty, can we be provided once you know when this is going to be presented to the commission's general policy committee?
I'll let you know. Like at the GPC meeting this Thursday, they'll adopt the schedule for the next 3 months, basically. So we'll know after the Thursday general policy committee meeting, and we'll forward that on. Robin will forward that on to them.
So in terms of because I think it is appropriate to add more than just the recommendation. I mean, I can write something and just add it in. you know, Jason could write something, I can write something, present it to you guys for your approval at the next meeting. What's your preference? You know,
I'm fine with you communicating something this one.
and as the dissenter on that motion, I think it's appropriate to, you know, if you have something that you'd like included, to include that in there. I mean, I don't know if that's.
I think it would be appropriate for you as chair to write a short summary of the position of the UAB on the issue. And make sure it gets brought forward.
I'm trying to think how we, because you can't send something to me to include.
But he can send it to me.
Would that, does that to have both a almost Supreme Court like
Minority.
Well, and anybody, I mean, I personally, I have already written a letter to the city commission.
well, this will become part of the official transfer. And then, as I said, I'm going to contact the mayor to see would he like for me to come to the meeting and do a specific presentation. Of course, everybody and anybody is welcome to do a citizen comment to at that meeting. Anything else before we move on to the next item? Next one. Yeah.
Since it's a workshop, I think we have the opportunity to sort of talk free form for a second about the future. The question I have is, we have a new mayor, and as a corporate board, we haven't met with the new mayor, and I'm wondering, maybe Robin can help us or something. Are we scheduled to meet with the new mayor at all in our plans? Or if we haven't set a date, I'm wondering if we want to talk about trying to make sure that we have, because in the past, we've met obviously with the city commission from time to time, but I'm unaware of any scheduled meetings set up right now.
The commission typically meets with you quarterly. I've not received any dates for quarterly meetings, but I will ask the clerk's office and we'll get those on the books.
That's a joint UAB city commission meeting.
Yes.
Is that what you're requesting, or you're?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's important in the sense we have a new administration and we need to get any feedback from the new mayor and the new administration as to our goal and agenda and vice versa. You know, what is it that we want to say to the new administration? I mean, we've done that many times in the past. It's just I wasn't aware of any formal date that had been set to do that with the new mayor.
I will ask the clerk's office and get back to you all.
Thank you. Anything else? Move on.
Where are we at on the agenda?
You're right. Public comment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We have a public comment.
Yeah, unfortunately, so.
Good evening, Nathan Scott. So I'm going to try and make this brief. Again, I support Jason and the efforts of the Weatherization Coalition. I mean, y'all do good work. Energy efficiency has been a strong point since my days on the PSC. Likewise, I've probably done more to advance renewable energy in the state of Florida than anyone sitting in the room. Okay. During my time on commission, I managed renewable energy projects. League of Women Voters guy left. They seem to be overly political, as well as some of the although it may be well-intentioned, but the time spent on this particular issue and the attention given on this particular issue just frankly annoys the hell out of me as a former state utility regulator, given all the problems and challenges at GRU. I mean, you guys are just, I mean, y'all would die on the sword over this issue. Rebates. Seriously, it's not the most important issue. You got people that can't afford their damn electric bill. And that's seems to be lost on this UAB. The comment was just made, well, we need to meet with the mayor because we need to understand the agenda and the role. It's not the role of the UAB. The role of the UAB, with all due respect, is to provide independent recommendation to the city commission, to be an advisory board, not to be lapdogs, not to be cheerleaders. If you want to support the utility, great. But I mean, we have issues that need to be addressed. And I waste my time coming down here speaking in vain to the walls, because it's the right thing to do, because I hope one day we'll wake up and have a utility that's Florida's flagship municipal utility instead of being owned by Wall Street bankers with $1.7 billion of outstanding debt. and the highest electric rates in the state of Florida. That's the economic reality. It's lost on the city commission. It's lost on the UAB. You guys don't put any of that time into looking at the budget, to looking at how are we going to lower rates, how we're going to get the meters read, how we're going to collect past due receivables, because end of the day, it's a revenue requirement. If some guy defaults on $39 million, $39,000, the country club, and there's no lien in place, it's the rest of us get left holding. And that's not the way to run a utility. I mean, you can put it to collections till the cows come home, but I'd prefer to have a lien as an attorney. You got more things to do. So again, UAB just needs to kind of focus on important issues, not this. It's become an ideologically driven tool. I mean, you heard that from the League of Women Voters guy, 300 members. We support this. How the hell does he think electrification, we're going to electrify everything? How's that going to happen? Natural gas. FPL gets 75% of its generation in the state of Florida from natural gas fired generation. Okay. We are not replacing nuclear. So where are you going to get this magical energy? Everything can't be solar. It's intermittent resource. It doesn't work at night. It's aspirational. It's good. It's well-intentioned, but it's lost sight of reality. And that's the problem that's caused this utility to lose its status as a flagship Florida municipal utility and become a laughingstock of everything in Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Member comments? Any member comments?
Yes. We're about ready to move into an IRP. What do you call it here? A lot of information. It's going to be a lot of data. And we focused a lot on costs. Okay. And I'd like to introduce a question more than an issue. And that is we talk a lot about cost per megawatt. What do you call it, when we bandied that around a lot. My assumption there is we're talking about O&M costs. When we get into the RFP, I'd like to have somebody explain in a fair amount of detail what goes into, what do you call it, the cost equation. And I'd like to make another request and see how close our model will be to the model that NREL, what do you call it, and the levelized cost of ownership, which is much different than an O&M model. I have it here. What do you call it? You can, all this is public information. You can get it at lazar.com. You can get it in NREL, but it's mostly, a lot of the many assumptions that go into that model. Now, I would really like to understand, how closely our model will be planning for 20 years, because we all start talking the same language. When we say cost per megawatt hour, what are we really talking about? Is that the cost of depreciation in there? Is it the cost, what do you call it, of our debt in there? What's in there and what's not in there? And so when we bandy these things about for the next 20 years, we need to understand that.
Hey, Tony, Eric, going to comment on that?
Sure. So chair members, that's a great question. Talking specifically about the IRP first and the process coming up. We are putting together a stakeholder advisory board or group to help advise that, and we will be asking a member of the UAB to sit on that stakeholder board. That board basically goes in depth to the things that go into the IRP, all the constraints, the model inputs, the outputs, what happens behind the scenes, the assumptions, the scenarios, the sensitivities, all those things that are run. That group will have insight into that. So very shortly, you'll receive a letter from the general manager asking for a representative for the UAB for that specific reason, to have input and to provide that feedback, not only back to this board, but also to other constituents. To get more into the modeling question for the IRP, when we look at the overall cost of the different scenarios, it will have everything on it. It will have the cost of capital. It will have O&M, fixed and variable. It will have fuel costs that are in there. Okay, it will have any CapEx that we have and debt service associated with any new units that are built. That goes into the total cost of each scenario. When we talk about dollars per megawatt hour on a dispatch, that only includes fuel and
I
variable.
understand that. That's where I'm getting at. And I would like to know, how closely does it come to this? Because everybody reads these things. Okay, when they talk about the difference between wind and solar, what do you call it, and gas and all the rest, and they look at it at a megawatt hour, what do you call it, cost per megawatt hour. There's a ton of assumptions in here. And so when we talk about it, how close are those two models?
So I'm not familiar in detail with all the NREL model, but typically it's done basically the same way when you're talking about dollars per megawatt hour. It's the fuel cost or the variable cost that's associated with that. And so when you look at natural gas, for instance, it is the cost of the fuel times the average heat rate of that unit. If you look at the state of Florida right now, the average heat rate, because FPL is so large and most of their power comes from the combined cycle, that heat rate has dropped, I believe, into the low 7s. Our incremental heat rate is in the 10s.
You're not, so when the IRP, you're looking at the life cycle.
Right.
Okay, that's what this is.
So
This is a levelized cost of ownership over, what do you call it, the asset over its lifetime.
Correct. The IRP will take into account those costs.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for, to see how close it comes to this, because these are the things that people quote all the time.
So we'll have a specific analysis done by the Energy Authority that puts all those costs into it so that you can compare.
I'd like to also, this is all public information. I'd like to get this out to this group. Okay, it's pretty simple stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lazard.com or nrel.gov, what do you call it? It's all there. What do you call it? You can spend a lifetime reading it.
Yeah, through Robin, we always have to be very careful how we do it, and we can't respond to it directly outside the meetings, but
I'd like us to be talking about the same numbers.
Yeah.
When you get to the RP, you're talking about lifetime cost.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what dollars per megawatt hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not confusing O&M with this.
Do you have a copy of the last IRP?
I'm familiar with them. I was at Florida Power Life for 30 years.
Well,
I've seen a lot.
Robin can send you the copy of the last one. You just got it as a PDF. It takes a couple hours to read, but it's very valuable as a foundation for what we're going to be doing in the future.
I think that's a great, as we're going into the next one to see.
Is that available?
Robin can send it to you. Steve?
Yes.
Like I said, I've seen tons of RFPs. So I know what, I
You
know
can read
generally
it
what
all.
goes into it.
Sure, I can send it out to the whole group again.
Okay.
That'd be great. And
It's
I
on the top of all the files.
and I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your questions, and a couple of thoughts, first, I think we'd all like to see some of that information. At least starting with definition of terms, as I said earlier, this is frustrating. We're like, what's that term mean? I guess a question maybe for Tony on this, kind of like I went through with you guys. I mean, the natural gas rebates, and again, to remind people, we were directed specifically by the commission to answer that, so wasn't something, that's why we focused on that one. Maybe they will use our recommendation, maybe they won't, we'll see, but at least that was something we were told as an advisory board to do, so that's what we did. Well, and now GRU was specifically, told by the city commission, support that effort, so, but generally, we don't, city commission or GRU doesn't report to us. But when someone like, has a question like this and wants something specific to save ourselves from the pain we went through tonight, that's why I was hoping to talk with GRU staff outside the meeting more, because it is painful for you guys, and I do apologize. What's the best way, should someone come, a member come to you and make a request, and you can say, yep, we'll do that, or no, we won't, or we can do this, try to be respectful of your time. Because sometimes we each have our own individual things that we want to, specialties that we want to dig into. I mean, we have 30 years of experience at FP&L that the rest of us don't have.
Yeah, so I think coming to me as a general manager is the best way to do that. And
email, what's your preferred?
Emailing me, Robin will help kind of. A lot of emails, kind of help do that, and again, with those types of things, I think I want to be sensitive to the resources and where we're allocating resources. The thing about the IRP is this is a great process where a lot of people can be involved in a lot of input instead of one by one picking off thoughts or ideas. This is like a process that you all can engage in, other people in our community, so that we're kind of all working on that together, and we have resources allocated to go through that process. So, I mean, if you ask me, that's the best place to kind of flesh out these ideas, and everything is through this IRP process for the next year.
Tony, I have no way trying to change your process, but if all I ask is can somebody show me how that process kind of either duplicates or dovetails into some of these other numbers, because these numbers show everywhere. Everybody looks at them. So if they're going to look at your numbers and they differ, somebody's going to ask the question, why?
Yeah, understood.
Anything else before we conclude? So.
One more comment. I apologize when we were talking about the quarterly report feedback earlier. I missed something, and I wish I would have seen this when other folks were here. But to me, there are three major legs if we were grading the utility from the average customer's perspective. I might be missing some, but to me, the three big ones are: what does it cost? What are the environmental effects of it? And how reliable is it? As a customer, those are three things I'm thinking of. And if I am sort of grading this utility the way that I would work with one of my students who's pursuing their GED, I might say, well, you got an A in social studies, you got an A in science, you need to bring your math scores up, right? To me, it is not all about the rates as much as some people try to make it such. This utility is doing some things incredibly well. And so what I have asked for, and I understand that this is not necessarily possible all the time, always to give us the best numbers, but what I'd like to see in these quarterly reports or annual reports as much as possible is as good a comparison as we can get of how GRU compares on those three things. How do we compare to other utilities around the state on our prices, on our environmental quality, and on our reliability? Because people in this community need to know what they're paying for. And yes, we're more expensive than FPL, but I'll take our environmental mix of this community over FPL any day. And we'll take the reliability of this utility compared to, say, Clay Electric any day. And I think people need to know that. And so to me, again, when I'm thinking of these quarterly reports, I'm thinking of something that is available to somebody on the street to read and say, how does my utility stack up? And again, some of the feedback was that this is not always feasible to get this data, can't always make good comparisons, but to the extent that we can, I think it should be in there. And I think that this utility could be doing a better job of telling its story to its customers, so that the number one thing that people are always thinking about is rates. Because there are a lot of people in this community, I would say, actually more people in this community care about reliability than care about rates. Turn the power off for a day and I guarantee you will find that. And I think a significant portion of people in this community care more about the environmental aspect than about rates. So the more complete a picture we can give of that story, we'll be doing everybody in this community a service and this utility. That's why I was asking for that in the reports, and as much as possible, I'd like to see that and could keep asking for that.
And I appreciate that comment. And on the rates, I think it is useful to take a look at the rate class, residential, non-demand commercial, demand, because I do look, those commercial rates are high. And people be aware of that, but that's a little out of whack at this point. But I do appreciate it. I would love to see that. That would be great.
Yeah, appreciate this.
Anything else before we conclude? Next meeting, regular meeting, February 9th, workshop February 28th. With that, thank you for your time.